Good afternoon. We're here today with...
In March 2018, we opened our doors to the public with a vision not just to create challenging professional theatre, but to use this as a platform to inspire and bring communities together. Theatre and culture build identity. With theatre and culture in our local life, the community landscape is more vibrant. Local life is enriched. We believe that the benefits of theatre should be available for everyone. Our Theatre for All programme has removed financial barriers, giving disadvantaged people access to the theatre free of charge.
So we were told that we'd come here and have a Christmas meal and then go and watch A Christmas Carol.
Our aim is to make live professional theatre available to everyone and use that experience for positive change. Theatre can be transformational in young lives. Our academy is now in its 4th year, and we continue to build on our vision of bringing the best performing arts tuition to the heart of the Cotswolds. We work hard to make our academy as inclusive and as accessible as possible. Discounts apply for parents with more than one child. Our bursaries help support talented children from less affluent backgrounds. The Academy creates a fun and challenging environment where children can build friendships and develop key skills not just for theatre, but for life. We are also able to provide real opportunities for students who wish to pursue careers in the arts.
My name is Harry Apps. I am currently playing Marius in Les Miserables in the West End.
Barn outreach and learning programs engage with thousands of people. Our free workshops support the drama curriculum in local schools. Singing and musical theatre workshops in community groups and care homes have helped address issues of isolation. Our Song for Cirencester project in aid of mental health charities brought our community together in an unprecedented way. We've collaborated with many charities in the region, including the Cllr project, to support individuals dealing with the barriers to finding work.
Since working with you, my life's changed. It's given me some purpose, given me an interest, some confidence I was lacking prior to all this.
The Barn Theatre played a pivotal role in the town's 2018 World War I centenary celebrations. Who could forget our record-breaking Human Poppy? Our live streaming work on the annual Advent Festival helped thousands engage and take part in Cirencester's Christmas festivities.
Death issues for thousands of families to confront.
In these times of uncertainty, we strive to keep the community together. The theatre may be temporarily closed, but our commitment to you goes on. Even now, our amazing costume department are helping the NHS by making scrubs for frontline workers. We've used our technology to build a free live streaming service that provides much needed community news and entertainment for all the family, broadcasting every day to keep us all connected. We are not just a theatre. We are the Barn.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's David Fowles, welcoming you to the 5th live stream with Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, our MP, and delighted to have him here. That was a great video on behalf of the Barn Theatre, and to see how much they're doing for the community, not least the work that they're doing with these live stream events, which we're all really grateful for. What we're going to try and do today is alter the format yet again by having some video interviews that you hopefully will find interesting on how businesses in the Cotswolds are coping and the initiatives that are creeping into the Cotswolds on a daily basis. And we're also going to have a report from the Cotswolds in the south and the Cotswolds in the north, given by a couple of high-ranking councillors. But the main thrust of today, as ever, is to hear an update from our MP, Sir Geoffrey, on what's happening with Westminster, and to answer as many of your questions as possible. The feedback we're getting via the Barn Theatre is that's what you want. You want your questions answered as quickly as possible, and Sir Geoffrey is going to continue to do that job to the best of his ability. So my role here today is merely to ask Sir Geoffrey the questions. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our virtual session today from the Barn Theatre. I'm going to rename it from now on the Barn. I think we should all know it as the Barn. It's as simple as that. And to thank everybody here who's made all this possible. But I thought that video was absolutely great. Seeing all those young people getting involved in the cultural life of the Cotswolds, the academy, what they can do for some of the youngsters who've hitherto had pretty little in their life, and suddenly they find a role in the academy. What a great thing to do. So thank you, Barn, for doing that, and anybody who can help them in any way, please do that. David, thank you to you. So I will make a few opening remarks by way of introduction. I suppose where we've got to with this all ghastly coronavirus is that we started off with a lockdown. To begin with, it was all quite novel, and we coped with it. And I think now everybody's finding it just a little tedious and finding that they can't go about their normal life. We will get on later in the programme, I'm sure, with questions as to how we end this whole thing. But I just would like to say, please continue to obey the government's guidelines. Basically, keep at home unless you have something listed that you can do outside, and stay safe and protect yourself and protect other people. So this week I will discuss the latest government corona announcements and some of the community news, discussing how we are all dealing with this coronavirus lockdown, which I've just been talking about. I will start by saying it is okay to be concerned. These are unprecedented times for all of us. I really realise that many of our children are being exposed to news that is not age appropriate on TV or online. These stories are coming to adults, and I know raise a lot of questions for children. It is important to ask questions about things that worry you or you don't quite understand. So we will be discussing the latest government coronavirus announcements and some community news, discussing how we're all dealing with the current situation. The government has announced that social distancing measures will continue for at least 3 weeks. I know it's hard for us not to be able to go out and do all the things we would all usually enjoy, seeing friends and family, going shopping, going to places like the cinema, playing sports, even going to the Barn Theatre, above all, people would love to do, but can't do under the present situation. But these measures have been put forward in place to tackle the coronavirus and save lives. That's not just our lives, it's the lives of people we might come into contact with and give the virus to. So this is a two-way thing. And remember, we must continue to stay at home to protect the NHS and save lives. It would be devastating for us to have gone through all this pain, if you like, in the last few weeks, only for a resurgence to take place because we raised the lockdown conditions too quickly. It is important to remember that our hospitals and all those working in them are well prepared to treat people who get sick. And I'm putting pressure on the government to make sure that Gloucestershire receives sufficient protective clothing that it needs. With 40,000 items of PPE delivered for frontline staff in the community last week. This will only tide us over for a short time, and therefore we must keep up the pressure to make sure that we get sufficient PPE. If individuals are risking themselves on the front line, the least the government can do is to provide them with that equipment. And of course, I realise that care homes have been at the sharp end of all this, and they particularly have had some very difficult instances to deal with, and they need to have their fair share of PPE as well. There are world-leading experts in this country and elsewhere in the world working to ensure that we reduce the impact of this pandemic and introduce and relax measures, but only at the right time. As I discussed last week, this period is beginning to bring out a great deal of kindness in the communities and from individuals. This is an important message for everyone, and I'm pleased today that we have some more examples of community work before answering some of the questions that have been sent in to me this week. So we've faced an unprecedented amount of work. My staff are dealing with enormous numbers of queries. If I'm not immediately able to get back to you, please bear with us. There are people who in this situation who are in great difficulties. They need help. And we are trying our level best, whether it be individuals, businesses, or communities, to give them that help, or at least put them in the direction of somebody else or some other organisation that can. So I will start now by giving a brief overview of the key announcements made this week by the government on COVID-19 action. And these are: relaxing any of the measures currently in place would risk damage to both public health and our economy. The worst thing we could do now was to ease up too soon and allow a second peak of the virus to hit the NHS and hit the British people. We have set out 5 specific things which the government will need to be satisfied of before we will consider it safe to adjust any of the current measures. We must protect the NHS's ability to cope. We must be confident that we are able to provide sufficient critical care and specialist treatment right across the UK. We need to see a sustained and consistent fall in the daily death rates from coronavirus so that we are confident that we have moved beyond the peak. And finally, we need to have reliable data from SAGE showing that the rate of infection is decreasing to manageable levels across the UK. We need to be confident that the range of operational challenges, including testing capacity and PPE, are in hand and we are able to supply and to be able to meet future demand. We need to be confident that any adjustments to the current measures will not risk a second peak of infection that overwhelm the NHS. And when we are confident that these 5 have been met, we will look to adjust the measures. We will only do it when the evidence, actual evidence on the ground, demonstrates that it is safe to do it. We will make these decisions at the right time for the people of this country. But for now, please bear with us. The most important thing people can do is to stay at home, to protect the NHS, to save their own lives and to save other people's lives. The Chancellor has expanded the coronavirus large business interruption scheme ahead of its launch on Monday, ensuring that no viable business slips through our safety net of support as we protect jobs and the economy. Firms with a turnover of more than 45 million will now be able to apply, and up to 25 million of finance, and up to 50 million for firms with a turnover of more than 250 million. Businesses with turnover of more than 500 million were originally not eligible for the scheme. but the scheme has been extended after extensive consultation with businesses to ensure that all viable firms are able to benefit from support. I do know that companies have had difficulty applying for this loan interruption scheme, and I would appeal to the banks to make it as easy with as little bureaucracy as possible so that we can get some of this money into firms as quickly as possible. We've said that we would support our economy, and we meant it. Our unprecedented package of measures is one of the most generous in the world, and we are ensuring that businesses are able to be provided with support they need during this pandemic, helping to provide job security to thousands of people and protect our economy. It is very important for you to be very clear when making applications, either to the interruption loan or for the grants administered through the district councils, that you fill in the forms absolutely correctly and give all the information. Because again, whether it be the government, the banks, or the district councils, they are struggling with a huge workload. And if they get an application that isn't complete, that, I'm afraid, will delay it for that individual business. So I'm aware there is some difficulty in paying out these loans due to repeat or incorrect applications. Please make sure you fill it in correctly. The government is giving councils greater financial relief by allowing them to defer 2.6 billion of business rate payments and paying up to 850 million in social care grants this month. These measures mean councils will be able to defer 2.6 billion of payments they are due to make to central government over the next 3 months as part of the business rate retention scheme. Additionally, the government will bring forward care grant payments to councils with 850 million for both children and adults. They will now be paid this month rather than monthly in April, May and June. In other words, the money will be brought forward into this month and will help to provide immediate care for frontline social care services. Of course, as you would expect, I'm in regular contact with both the government, with the health service, with the police, the county council, and both district councils that I represent, Cotswolds and Stroud. They are making sure, working hard, and this is particularly important, to ensure that every vulnerable person is looked after during this period. It isn't just the 1.5 million people that the government initially identified. We are now finding a few people outside of that vulnerable group. Because they don't fit into the criteria, they might have other health complications, they might be younger. And so I would say to everybody, please look out for your neighbours. We don't want to snoop on people, but if you haven't seen your neighbours for a few days, just give them a ring or an email and just say, are you all right? I did that with my neighbour, and I found that they got everything they needed and they were fine. But we don't want to find, when this whole thing is over, that somebody, and I suspect it will be in a small, rural community, has been suffering and has not had the support that they desperately need. So in that respect, Stroud District Council will be sending out letters to every single household next week to make sure that no one who is in need of help is left behind. These will be printed on yellow paper. They will be easy for those hard of sight to read. I implore you to read them. I implore you to take action on them. And if you need help, please don't be too proud to either ask me or your local vicar, as John said last week, and we will point you in the direction of an organisation who will be able to help you. Even with the council action, it is vital, as I've said, that we look after our neighbours. And we should contact the council if there is something you may think that a neighbour needs. You could also contact me, or as John said, the vicars. I realise that many of you are already doing this, but if we could check in with anyone who might be struggling during this time, not just the elderly, but a neighbour who might be vulnerable, or a family that may be caring for a sick child. These are challenging times, but the kindness being shown by individuals in our community is actually heartwarming and wonderful. Please keep doing that. A new action plan for adult social care has been published. This sets out the government's plan for minimising the spread of the infection in care home settings and supporting the workforce to address the unprecedented challenges posed by the coronavirus. 1. ensuring that everyone who needs a test for coronavirus in a social care setting will be able to receive one. 2, testing every social care worker who needs one. 3, extending the cut-off date for the Corona Job Retention Scheme to make the scheme more generous and to be more helpful to more people. Finally, the government are providing over 14 billion from the Coronavirus Emergency Response Fund for public services, including the NHS and local authorities involved in the fight against coronavirus. I'm working very hard with my 2 district councils and will continue to do so, that they receive the money that they are justly due from the government for the extra work that they undertake. And this support builds on the initial 5 billion announced in the budget, and we are helping our public services with. Firstly, 6.6 billion to support our health services, 1.6 billion for local authorities, 0.9 billion to cover extra measures such as home delivery of food and medicines, 3.5 billion to ensure vital rail services continue to operate for those who rely on them for essential journeys and key workers, 2 billion for the devolved administrations. Outlining extra support to protect the victims of domestic virus during this national emergency so that they have a safe place to go if they can't stay at home. The Home Secretary has launched a campaign to tell victims that they can leave home to get the support they need and is providing 2 million to enhance online support services for those who are suffering domestic abuse so that anyone who needs it can access that help and support. That is the end of the report of the very considerable compendium of measures that the government are offering individuals and organisations. Now, I realise that not everybody will fit into all of those categories. That is the purpose of this question and answer session, so that we can hear from some of the people who actually need help and don't fit those categories. Thank you very much for listening to all of that.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. And as I said earlier, we're now going to start with some questions and then intersperse the questions with a couple of video updates just to alter the pace, and end the session with a couple of reports from colleagues in the north and the south of the Cotswolds. So the first question is a subject that you've touched on before. One other difference is we're going to try and put the questions that have been received previously up on screen so that you can actually view those questions so that I don't have to read them out verbatim. So the first question is from Anne Gollix, and she's concerned that we've heard a lot about people visiting their second homes during the coronavirus, despite the government's ban. But her real issue is to do with local owners and agents of holiday accommodation in the Cotswolds still advertising availability in their properties, not only during Easter, but beyond. And while she's aware that some of that accommodation is available for key frontline staff, some of the rates that are being charged are way beyond their means, and there are some luxury cottages which are still being advertised at prices which are inappropriate in the current climate. And she wonders what your thoughts are on that.
Right. Just before I came on this programme, I had a conversation with Simon Elson of the Cotswold Constabulary. The government law on this is very clear, and if I could just make it clear to all of our listeners. This is the emergency coronavirus regulations. Regulation 6, the health protection, brackets, coronavirus restrictions, close brackets, England regulations 2020, state no person may leave the place where they live without a reasonable excuse. This does not apply to homelessness. So it is very clear, I think, David, that nobody should be leaving one home to go and live in another home. And I would implore, as I did last week, we've answered this question on a number of occasions now on these sessions, nobody should be travelling to their second home in the Cotswolds because it is not an essential purpose. The only reason they might have to travel to their second home is if there is some form of an emergency. There's a huge water leak or something like that and they've got to attend to it. But the general advice is that they should not be travelling to second homes. The advice is also very clear. People should not be letting out their houses at overcharged rates or not. They should just not be letting them out because that's encouraging people to travel. I understand that Airbnb, under pressure, have cancelled all their listings. So again, nobody should be letting houses out on Airbnb. And I think quite clearly, if somebody travelled to the Cotswolds before the 23rd of March, before the lockdown take place, it would be folly to encourage them to go back from wherever they came, because that's putting another lot of people at risk. But I would implore to anybody listening to this, please don't travel to your second home. The police have investigated a number of incidents where they get a complaint. If you think there's been a gross violation or it's continuing to go on, then make a complaint to the police and they will judge whether it needs to be looked into or not. But I am very clear, you should not leave your house unless it's for one of the purposes listed by the government's guidelines.
Thank you. Next question. This is an anonymous question. Some of them are because it's a sensitive subject. This is someone who has had a response from CDC. They wrote to you before and unable to receive their £10,000 cash grant. They rent directly from the council. Due to the structure of their lease, the rent is inclusive of all business rates. However, they are not in the government's business rate system. It is CDC. A representative of CDC has now told this person that due to my scenario, which is out of my control as a tenant, I cannot receive the grant. This potentially means bankruptcy and the closure of my business and the resultant effect on 250 young students who attend. This seems incredibly wrong to me. Please, could you advise me as to where I might stand on this and how I could take the matter further? And that's from an anonymous person based in Cirencester.
Well, I think the answer to that question is really, please email me, whoever you are, email me. I'm sure the council isn't going to be vindictive against you. cliftonbrownG@parliament.uk, no dots, commas or anything else, cliftonbrownG, all one word, at parliament.uk, no co's or coms, and we will take it up with the council. Let's just see what can be done.
Okay. I think that's important, that when people are contacting you via live stream or via emails, that they can, of course, write to you directly on a confidential
Indeed, and
basis.
I understand, whoever you are, that, and you wish to remain anonymous because you don't want your business or your name to be publicised. But if you do email me, I can assure you that that anonymity will be respected and it'll only be known to myself and the council. And let's see if we can deal with your seemingly pretty desperate inquiry.
Next question. We've got two questions, actually, in relation to the garden waste service, given that Spring's here. And one is a more general question. It's as follows. Just before coronavirus hit, CDC arbitrarily increased the cost of the garden waste service and reduced it to a fortnightly service. They also talked about the climate emergency and about the green agenda. Isn't this a little bit hypocritical that since then CDC have now stopped the service completely? And apparently, apart from Tewkesbury, the Cotswolds is the only authority in Gloucestershire who has suspended the service, blaming it on manpower shortages. This is a joke, particularly when there are people queuing up for work, particularly in the casual sector, who can't claim any grants and are desperate for work. We are now heading towards our 5th week, and the garden is great exercise and a pleasure for most people. Please, could you get CDC to change their minds?
Well, I understand the question absolutely, and having a garden myself and had great pleasure. Having had the time and having forced to be at home, I've had great pleasure in doing gardening, and I would like to use the green waste scheme. So I understand from all those people, and indeed in the last Thursday's collection in my own village, about half the people had put out their green bins in the anticipation that they would be emptied. I think the message on the Cotswold District Council's website hadn't been entirely clear, but it is now. I think the District Council obviously had to concentrate on their primary duty first, which was to make sure that all of the normal food waste and other recycling waste was collected, and that inevitably has increased hugely. But having done that and having got into a system, I would like to discuss with them in my next week's conference call whether it would be possible to restart the garden waste as soon as possible, because clearly it is a service that's much needed, and if people are being prevented doing their gardening because it's not there, that I think is unfortunate. So I hear the question, I understand the frustration, and I will take it up with the council in my next week's conference call.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Geoffrey. And I think it's worth pointing out that you do have regular dialogue with Councillor Joe Harris and his team, and that you can act as a conduit for people's concerns,
Exactly.
as indeed he can the other way to you.
Exactly.
This is a question about someone who's basically running their own business, but it's this theme of small limited companies, if you remember. The group of companies that typically have one or two directors out there, and it's about 2 million small limited companies, generally also who have one or possibly two employees. Many had to become limited due to pressure from their clients. Dividends aren't tax-free. Initially, they are taxed at 19% corporation tax. After £2,000, an employee has to pay 7%, making the tax liability 26%. If we take two graphic designers, one a limited company and one a sole trader, and they both earn £30,000 a year, they will pay the same amount of tax to the Exchequer. Under government plans, the sole trader will receive £2,500 per month and be free to carry on working. The director, owner, only employee of the limited company will receive £575 from the job retention scheme, but not allowed to work. My council tax will absorb most of the 50% of this, and there are utility bills, mortgages, etc. to pay. Do you feel this is fair? Has the government left us behind? It's from Stephen Makin.
Yes, well, thank you, Stephen. I do understand the problem, and I do understand that certain people were required by their clients to operate as small companies. We've made representations to the government. I think the government are just feeling that they can't help everybody in every situation, and they have been very generous to the main groups. And although I and other members of Parliament have made strong representations, I don't think the government are going to bend on this. And I'm sorry about that, but we will keep trying.
Okay, could we, at this point, I think it might be an opportunity just to share an idea that's being developed in Cirencester. And earlier, we had a couple of videos that were made from local businesses, and I'd really like to play the first one, Sir Geoffrey, which is from Annemarie Thurgood of Athena Web Design, who's offering a service that could be of use to small retailers. Good afternoon. We're here today with Annemarie Thurgood, who is a founder and director of Athena Web Design based in Cirencester. She's also currently the president of the Cirencester Chamber of Commerce. And she's our first guest speaker for a new feature on Geoffrey's live stream, which is how we're coping with the coronavirus and the initiatives that we're coming up with in the Cotswolds. And so I'd really like to firstly introduce and welcome Annemarie. So welcome, Annemarie. Firstly, can I ask you how you're finding business at the moment, given the nature of your client base? How are you managing to cope?
We aren't too bad at the moment. We have quite a large mixture of clients. So some have been, I'd say, badly affected, but we've also got some that are actually thriving. So they're balancing each other at the moment. But I can foresee problems probably over the next 2-3 months as a consequence of this.
Do you think some of your, do you think most of your clients will survive this, the virus, or are some making plans? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I'd say we probably have some that are at high risk. They haven't said that they are worried that they will suffer, but I think they probably will. There's probably a handful at the moment that are severely affected that just can't trade at the moment at all.
Right. So that leaves
whether they have the funds to weather the storm. Really, it just depends how long this is going to go on for.
Yeah, I was really sad to hear yesterday about Alex Cars in Cirencester, been trading for over 70 years. That's a really local example of how this is affecting local business. And I know you, as the Chamber of Commerce President, will be very concerned about that. I gather that you've got a new initiative that you'd like to talk to us about, which is a new initiative to help retailers in Cirencester. Would you like to try and explain to us exactly what the idea is and how people could take advantage of your wonderful initiative?
Yeah. So myself and Michelle were trying to think of something we could do to help, because there's only so much we can do at the moment to help our clients by adding notices onto their sites, making any suggestions that we feel might help them. But we wanted to try and do something to help the town and help the businesses that probably are one of the more affected at the moment. So we chose retail. So we've built a site that will enable all the retailers in Cirencester to create an online shop. So it'll work in a very similar way to Amazon. Each retailer will have their own account where they can upload their products, and customers will go onto that website, purchase anything they need. They can purchase across all the retailers. So it will work in a way just like Amazon. So you have a shared shopping cart, and then once the money is kind of put through, that then distributes out to all the different retailers. And we're doing that totally free of charge. The only charges that there will be are the PayPal transaction charges, which are unavoidable. But yeah, they get full training as well. So we hold their hand. They don't have to have technical experience. We're trying to make this as easy as possible for them. So hopefully that's going to be going live next week. We've got a few people on board already that have uploaded their products, just so that we can test it and make sure it is working as it should. But all being well, next week is going to be our launch date, because I see this affecting retailers for a long time. I don't think it's going to be 3 weeks and then back to normal. This is going to be for the long haul, and we're going to offer this service for as long as COVID-19 is affecting things.
That's brilliant. And what's it called, and how can they get in touch with you?
So it's called Cirencester Locals. We are at the moment setting up social media pages, which will be live in the next couple of days. If they need to contact us, if they go to our website, so it's athenawebdesigns.co.uk, and use the contact form on there, they will then be able to reach us.
Okay, thank you very much. It's lovely to see you. I hope everything goes well. Look forward to staying in touch. And would you like to come on the programme again to let us know?
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant. Okay,
yeah, no
thanks
problem.
a lot. Many thanks.
Okay.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
And you. Bye.
Well, Jeff, what do you think of that idea? I think it's good.
I think it's great. I'm absolutely certain that after this whole coronavirus is over, we're all going to think how we are going to live our lives. And I think many of us will have got much more used to shopping online. And so I think Annemarie's initiative is fantastic, and I think it will work. And I encourage every business in Cirencester, and I don't see why it shouldn't be from further afield in the Cotswolds and Gloucestershire as well. The more businesses I imagine you get, Annemarie, the better, because you then get more browsers onto your website. So many congratulations, more power to your elbow.
Okay. Well, as we say, we're going to try and feature examples to try and share with people, because it gets quite boring just listening to me talking to you. You're much more interesting than I am. But moving on swiftly, another gardening question. This is from Peter Armitage. As gardening is considered to be good for exercise and mental health for all ages, I wonder if you could help with some suggestions as to what to do with the garden waste now that CDC have suspended its collection service. My green bin is and has been full for some time now. Perhaps you could bring some pressure to bear. I mean, it's the same question, but basically he's saying any thoughts, because it's just what I should say at this point, and you made the point, Sir Geoffrey, is now that we separate our food waste from our green waste, the food waste is being collected. So you're not having food going putrid in green bins, but nonetheless, there's tons of it.
So I thought when David was reading out the question that you were going to, Peter, want me to give you gardening advice when we got that far, and I certainly wouldn't want to give you gardening advice, except that I think we're all learning a great deal about our gardens. We're learning about what plants thrive in what conditions, and I've certainly been out there in the garden doing that. Garden waste, as I've already said in an answer to an earlier question, I will take this up with the Cotswold District Council and just see if we can get this service going as quickly as possible. The other little bit of advice I suppose I can give you is, and to others, is to try and see perhaps you could build a container of some sort of wooden container and see if you can compost some of this waste, and then you'll find this time next year when you're ready to bed out some of your plants, you'll have some wonderful compost and won't have to go off and buy it.
Great. Moving on in terms of a discussion about waste, this is from Peter Brayley. He has actually asked a question about the furlough scheme, but it was more of a statement about the fact that he thought it was unfair that he was finding himself not able to claim as a single company director, and we have talked about that before. But this is quite an interesting thing. It's to do with waste to energy. He just, because he's an expert in this particular field, would just like to highlight one aspect after you read quite an extensive content that I have set to you separately. Javelin Park needs 72% waste loading, and after that it needs refiring on diesel to maintain exhaust gas to acceptable discharge levels. The basic problem with Javelin Park is that if we're not collecting waste from the commercial sector, that it could run out of fuel within 2 weeks and remain needing to be refired within some weeks. I'm not an expert in that field, but have you come across anything to do with the fact that Javelin Park may not be able to function?
No, this is the first time I've had this particular question to me. I mean, if we could just get the details of that,
yeah.
I'm more than happy.
I think we should share that with Nigel Moor, because he's the portfolio holder.
Indeed.
Okay. And
Thank you.
I'll get all that information over
Thank
to
you.
him. Okay. It's quite a long one from Amanda Davis. It's in 4 parts. Amanda is a councillor, and she is involved with the Borton Street Volunteers. So I'm going to do them quickly and individually. You've previously agreed to kindly petition the ministerial team that one of the daily briefings be dedicated to answering questions asked by children. It's interesting, in your opening remarks, you said that children are listening to stuff that, frankly, children shouldn't have to listen to online and on air, and that there might well be a situation where you could follow the example of the Canadian MP about a fortnight ago, when a 5-year-old asked Justin Trudeau, if mummy has to go into hospital, who will take care of me? Do you have any thoughts?
I have, and I will continue to do so, Amanda. I think it would be a really good idea to have a few questions asked by younger children. They have a different perspective on life, and we should respect that and try and make life as easy for them as possible. So I will continue to do that. May I thank you, Amanda, very much. I know you want to speak to me very much for all that you're doing in Borton. It is much appreciated. Please keep doing it.
Okay. The next question is on VE 75, which is the celebrations to mark the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. These were due to take place with street parties up and down the land and a dedicated bank holiday. How is this now going to be marked safely, with our nation's VE celebrations effectively be postponed, perhaps to VJ Day? Please advise.
Well, David, you and I have talked about this, and we were going to have a massive celebration here in Cirencester. And I hope at some point later this year we'll be able to resume that celebration and combine it with a celebration of having put coronavirus behind us. I don't know when that will be, but I hope it's going to be later this year. I mean, David, you were involved hugely with those celebrations. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, I'd like to reflect what you've just said. I think there are people that we're talking about this saying, don't let's celebrate the end of, just celebrate the end of World War II. Let's celebrate the end of World War III, because at the end of the day, as Boris said, we're at war with an unknown enemy, an unseen enemy, and in many cases it's regarded as more scary than some of the things that went on in the Second World War. So yes, let's wait until this one's over and then have a huge celebration to commemorate the loss of life, which is tragic in both the wars, the Second World War and the Third World War that we're fighting now.
Can I just make one further point? The question actually raised a really interesting point, which I've always thought is odd. For some reason, VE Day is regarded as more important than VJ Day. Maybe it's because there were greater numbers involved, I don't know. But for those that were involved in the Far East campaign, many of them had to go through horrific conditions. And if we do postpone it to VJ Day, perhaps that will put a little bit more focus on that Far Eastern campaign and the people who suffered in it.
Good idea. I think we could wrap it all together. It'd be really good. Next question. Guidance for police was issued yesterday, Thursday, 16th of April, that people could reasonably drive to the countryside for a long walk, so long as their walk was for a longer duration than their drive. 1. Countryside does not mean villages. Borton remains closed, in capital letters. Please ask for this to be made very, very clear. That's number 2. Number 3, with District Council and local village car parks currently closed and barricaded, where will people park? We will now need to use extra police resources to reinforce the message that exercise is fine once a day, but stay local. Borton Village remains closed. I think she's just making a very clear statement about Borton as a supporter and key player in the Borton community.
The important part about what you've just said, Amanda, is that the countryside does not mean the villages. It means countryside, open countryside. And again, even in the open countryside, when parking, we should have consideration for the local farmers and others in the countryside, not interfere in any way with their stock, because this is an important time of year. So I think people need to just think very carefully when they go out of their home, where they're going, how long they're going to be there, and where they're going to park. Thank
you. Next question is to do with nursing. I have friends who are nurses. This is from Cllr. They have been asked to do overtime as they work part-time. They receive tax credits because they are low-income households. Their partners are currently not working due to COVID-19. They really want to help their colleagues and have all the skills to nurse through this current situation, but have to refuse the overtime because of their tax credits will be affected. In this current situation, could there be some arrangement so that they won't be penalised? That's an interesting dynamic.
It is a very interesting dynamic, Cara. I think those that are people who are doing important frontline work, such as the person you suggest, should receive due consideration. And I have the details, and I will take it up, and I'll let you know what the outcome is.
Next question is to do with the hospitality and leisure sector, which we know in the Cotswolds is under huge pressure. Government grants for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses only seem to help those who pay business rates. And help for self-employed does not appear to include income from furnished holiday lets. If someone's only income is from their furnished holiday let, on which they pay ordinary council tax, and their income tax abruptly stops because their income abruptly stops because of coronavirus, is there any grant which they might be qualified for?
Well, the only grant that I can think of that would cover you in this situation is the business interruption loan, which might give you a little bit of cash flow to keep you going. I agree with you. If you are not, and most holiday lets now are on business rates, and if you are below the level, you can get business rate relief, so you don't actually pay any business rate at all. So the fact that you're on council tax, I presume, means that you're probably occupying your dwelling part of the time. So I'm afraid to say I can't see any government scheme at the moment that would fit your situation.
Thank you. I know we're rushing through these, but that's what we were asked to do by people, not get involved in sidetracking or anything like that. So next question. Dear Sir Geoffrey, this is anonymous. The government announced yesterday that the lockdown was going to continue for a further 3 weeks. And we have the 5-point plan. Meanwhile, the new leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, has requested that the government announce details of their exit strategy. What is the reason for the delay? Why aren't we, like other countries, getting an opportunity to know how we're going to come out of this on the other side, and to maybe think about young people going back to work, or the construction industry going back to work as is happening in other countries? Do you have a view?
Well, I think the reason for the delay is that the government doesn't want anybody to second guess who might be going first and who might not be going first, because then those that are not allowed to go back to work, or whatever it happens to be, will start lobbying and complaining. I think this is going to have to be a gradual process. There will be some groups that will go back sooner than others, and we will just have to respect that. But I stress, as I stressed in my opening remarks, we will need to be guided by the medical evidence, and we mustn't do it too quickly, or we risk another outbreak and more deaths.
Okay, thank you for that, Sir Geoffrey. It's another one from Cara. She's talking about, again, about her daughter's situation. While I do completely understand the severity of our current situation, I'm concerned that current restrictions on travel preclude familial support to the non-vulnerable, but those who are nevertheless in need. In my case, my daughter lives in Swindon. She has a full-time job, but because of her COVID-19, she has to work at home. She works in research and is not classed as an essential worker. Her partner goes to work. She has 4 daughters, the youngest being 15 months old. With the schools and nurseries closed, she is struggling to cope with work and managing particularly the 15-year-old. I live in Cirencester and could help. So obviously there's an issue there. She's not over 70, and therefore she doesn't come into the vulnerable age group. What could she do? Is the whole process too stringent? Is that something that could be?
Well, I don't think so. I have to say I have to be quite rigid about this, because it's just supposing you did travel from Cirencester to Swindon, you're not only risking yourself, but you're risking that family, your family as well, because one of you might be carrying the disease. And one of the nasty factors about this virus is that you can be contagious before you actually show symptoms of the disease. So you might have mixed with somebody in Cirencester on a food shopping trip, for example. You might have the disease, you might not know you've got it, and you might then take it to your family in Swindon, who might then suffer from it. So I'm afraid the government is right with these very stringent rules, and we should all obey them, and that is why we are being very cautious as to when we can end them.
Thank you. We're now on to the live streaming. This is from Rosemary Andrews. I would like to know what is being done about the appalling lack of PPE in care homes and even in the hospitals. All very well for us to clap, but the right equipment in the right place is far more useful and more reassuring.
There has been, Rosemary, a shortage of PPE. We have to admit it. There has not been enough PPE in the UK as a whole. Clearly, the government has had to prioritise that PPE for the frontline services in the health service, and I fully admit that, frankly, the care sector has suffered. We have been lobbying very hard for that sector. There was a significant delivery of PPE into the sector last week. But I'm not anticipating that will last very long, and we will need to keep up the pressure. And that you have my absolute assurance we will be doing. We will be covering it in our main health conference call in just a few minutes' time.
Okay. Richard Harrison is asking a question about, it's a request really, for you, Sir Geoffrey. Public Health England now only seems to be publishing the latest daily figures for each upper tier health authority. And then he quotes a website, rather than the trend data. Given that the epidemic is at different stages in different areas, this is extremely unhelpful in terms of helping to determine the most appropriate actions for communities and volunteers to take locally. It's an interesting point that he's talking about, the fact that we're not all moving at the same pace. Different parts of the country are moving at different paces. Please could you ask PHE to revert to publishing the trend data as well?
I will do just that.
It's very useful. It's a quick, simple answer. Ben Cowdell, I have a few questions to ask on behalf of a friend who is a key frontline worker, but unfortunately not able to view this live stream. I'd like to ask a few points which I have previously emailed to Sir Geoffrey, but have yet to been able to receive a reply. But you commented on that earlier. I understand that he is quite busy at the moment. What is the justification for MPs being given £10,000 to work from home? What extra expenses does this need to cover at a time when most of us are going out? It would be a fine example to refuse the money. I think you commented on that last week, but maybe you want to just give an update on the 10,000.
I did comment on that last week. The first point to make is that I will not receive personally a penny of that £10,000. The only way I could benefit from that £10,000 is by some extra expense that's being caused by the whole of this corona outbreak. So I found when I had to self-isolate at home that my computer wasn't sufficiently good enough, so I have taken advantage of the allowance, which I would have been able to do anyway without the allowance, and bought a new desktop computer. But other than that expense, I don't anticipate using any of the other allowance, and I will not benefit from it. I think it was very badly handled. I think the general public thought it was a general pay increase for members' expenses. It certainly isn't, and only be able to claim if we produce proper receipts for anything that we've bought.
And as you say, you did answer that directly last week, and for what it's worth, the gentleman who asked it last week wrote an email back to you saying thank you for being so direct and clarifying the situation. Next question from Ben Cowdell. In hindsight, do you, Sir Geoffrey, regret the Conservatives declining an NHS pay rise in 2017 and some of the disgusting scenes in the House of Commons that our party cheering this decision? Sorry, the Conservative Party. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I don't recall the disgusting scenes in the House of Commons. I think the House of Commons got itself into a very bad place in the last year or two of the last government, whether it was over pay rises for health workers or Brexit or any other issue. I think it was not helped by the behaviour of the Speaker. All I can tell you is since we've had a new Speaker, the behaviour in the House of Commons has hugely improved. We were in a difficult position with the austerity. We didn't want to get this country into a position where the debt and the deficit was unsustainable. And we will have to think very carefully when we come out of coronavirus what we can afford to pay and what we can't. But I'm sure that the behaviour and the hard work and the risk that the frontline workers have played in this whole virus will play deeply on government's mind when they're considering pay awards in the future.
Okay. What we'd like to do now is just to share another initiative that's a Cotswold-wide initiative with our viewers. And then come back to some more questions. Can I hand over to the video, please? I'd like to welcome Adam Vines, who is the founder and owner of Lounge Design, part of the Nettle group of independent design agencies based throughout the world. And I think there are over 200 of them in the UK. And Adam is a leading light in terms of design, web design, branding, corporate identity here in Cirencester. So welcome, Adam. First question is, how are you finding life at the moment in terms of running your business? How are your clients reacting at the moment to the issues affecting them as a result of coronavirus? Have you got some general thoughts?
Yeah, hi David, thank you. There's a change curve, and we're sort of like we've hit gone past the shock part at the moment. So I think people are generally starting to realise that there is life after, obviously, what's gone on. The first week, or just before the first week of lockdown, we had loads and loads of projects postponed, which was perfectly normal and natural. We've started to have a few little bits come back in from clients from really who's starting to sort of like think, right, well, they've gone through a bit of downtime and thinking about what they can do with their businesses once all this ends, or we at least get back to some normality. So they're starting to look at their own marketing and how they get to take it forward. But yeah, it's been a strange old time. We're trying to do what we can for the community, because I would much rather be doing things for using our talents and such like for the greater good locally than sitting at home watching Netflix.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I think you've got two initiatives, actually. The one, as you just said, is that you've been promoting a free service, haven't you, design service to charities and voluntary organisations. Would you just like to say something about that?
Yeah, again, one of the first things we've done was we realised that being a design team, we're not that helpful when there's a huge global pandemic. We don't have much skills.
You're not an essential worker.
No, exactly. There's certainly a lot of people who are a lot better at what we can do what we can offer in an emergency. Logo design is probably not high up the list, but so we realise there's obviously a lot of heroes out there doing better things. But we wanted to. The one thing that we are good at is communication or helping get messages across. So one of the first things that we offered out was how we can help communities and charities during this time to actually just help them produce posters, social media, anything which helps them publicize what they're doing. So yeah, we offered that as a free service. So yeah, and we've been working with the Cirencester COVID-19 group and such like, just to help them really.
That's great. I mean, because we all know that the voluntary sector is hurting more than most, actually, because all their funding streams have dried up. And thank you for what you're doing for the community. But the second initiative, which I know are keen to promote and let people know about, is this website that you've been developing with Nettle to help the service sector across the Cotswolds. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So it's what we've been doing is for the last week or so is it actually came out from partly me wanting to source or find a tradesperson to come and do some bits and bobs, but not being able to contact them. And I think I rang the office and there was particularly no one there at the time, because there wasn't as much staff there as what there normally would be. So I know Athena's doing a great initiative regarding retail for the town, but we wanted to have something which would showcase a little bit more for self-employed people and for small service businesses like accountants, locksmiths, all the usual kind of things. So what we're doing is we're starting to build a directory under the URL of cotswolds.support. covering pretty much most of the Cotswolds, be broken down into different towns. And it's just really gives the ability for smaller businesses who may or may not have their own website to list what they're doing and whether they're open, closed, if they're ever doing a reduced service, even sort of like their COVID-19 statements, or the fact that they were aware in how they will work. So yeah, we're just putting everything together at the moment, hoping that it should go live next week. So we'll start to promote it and get businesses registered on it. But yeah, it's free for them to list on. We're building it and developing it all really just for the good of the community, to hope that we can put something back, really. So yeah, we're hoping that it will be a go-to place if you're looking for a particular trade, or just to find something out. You can search by town and just find out a little bit of information and just an update for your local area.
That's absolutely brilliant, Adam. And we'll get more details, I'm sure, through your social media skills. Can I thank you for what you're doing for Cirencester and the surrounding community, and wish you and your family a very happy weekend. And we'll stay in touch. Thanks a lot. Okay?
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Thank you.
What do you think of that initiative, the idea of a service-based website that people can put information on and make their services available? Because at the moment their normal channels like leaflet drops, newspapers, whatever, basically have dried up completely.
Well, David, Adam, another excellent initiative for every service industry that would like to list free on your website. I think is a fantastic initiative. And as I say, once this whole thing is over, I think that every business will want to re-examine how it markets itself. And this must be a very good port of call for a marketing initiative.
Moving back to the questions, and as you very kindly just said, Sir Geoffrey, there are so many questions, and the Barn Theatre have kindly said that they'll run this session and through till 4:30, so we can cover as many as possible, and then play out with the two videos on the reports from the north and the south, because as we said at the beginning, this is about questions and you answering those questions, and that's the main thrust of this. So back to the questions. This is from Nick Steele, 46, one of many who say they set up a limited company on the encouragement of one government, only now to be treated inferiorly by another. He and his partner have run a hospitality recruitment company in Gloucestershire since 2006, but since the epidemic, all their work has evaporated. Back then, I think they thought it was more controllable and easier to deal with from a tax limited company point of view. Now it seems the government wants to crush us, he says. I have no choice but to sell personal possessions and borrow money. For the record, I can't get a government grant. You've read the rest of that question, Sir Geoffrey, so I don't want to repeat it all because I want to get through as many questions as possible. But as he ends, he says, I'm not some high net worth individual. I'm not squirreling money away. I fill out the tax return every year. It's just that in one column I state my income from PAYE, and in another column the income is from dividends. The government's policy just doesn't stack up. You've heard this issue of dividends before. Do you think there'll be any progress from government on people?
Nick, I'm sorry to hear that you're in such difficulties. It's disturbing to hear of anybody whose business is in difficulty. I've made an enormous number of representations about limited companies and dividends. I have to say, in all frankness, I don't think the government is going to move on this, but I will continue to use whatever opportunity I have to make representations on your behalf. And maybe if you could, I know, I actually discussed your case in our office morning conference calls at 9 o'clock. Your case was discussed. I can only say that I'm very sorry, and I wish the government would move, but I don't think they're going to.
Thank you, Geoffrey, and thanks for being so honest, because when you can help, you say you can, and when you can't, you make it very clear. I know it's very painful for all of us when you literally got no grant and no money. It must be really, really tough, especially if you've got a family. Another question from Ben Cowdell. This crisis has highlighted who really are key in our society. Many of these roles are within the public sector. When the crisis is over, there will be a debt to be repaid by the government for those who have supported and have given so much to so many people. What assurances can be put in place to ensure public services are not further cut back and that there is continued investment and a recognition that these people deserve decent pay, which has been so badly slashed over the years of austerity?
Well, David, I did hint at the answer to this question. I didn't know it was coming in an answer to a previous question. Those that are on the front line that are given such valiant and risky service during this whole coronavirus outbreak, I think will be much valued by, or valued more by society than they have been before. And I'm sure this will weigh heavily on government when they are considering future pay awards to those people.
Okay. Ben just wants to end on his own question as opposed to ones on other people's behalves. My own question. Recently, many business owners have taken pay cuts. The British public have been making many charitable donations, and heads of government and ministers around the world have also been making sacrifices in their salary in a show of solidarity. Do you think it would be a good idea to follow their example?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Will you take a pay cut?
I had never thought about it before. I will think about it.
Thank you for saying that, Sir Geoffrey. I know that there are other people who would appreciate you responding in that way. Rachel, sorry, the text is quite small. It's Rachel Greatorex Jones is her name, and her question is, can I ask Sir Geoffrey this, please? In the light of the current pandemic, wouldn't it be prudent to ensure that there is an extension of the Brexit transition period? Why does the government seem keen to still go ahead when we undoubtedly will be suffering from the fallout of COVID-19? Why hasn't Michael Gove resigned, or at least apologised for what can only be seen as incompetence regarding failing to respond in time to the EU procurement scheme and his false claim that the availability of COVID-19 testing kits was due to a lack of chemical reagents? Well, there's another very direct question about a colleague of yours, and you've already talked previously about Brexit, but would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure, Rachel, you were one of those that were opposed to us leaving Europe. Nevertheless, the British people spoke, and we made it quite clear in our manifesto what we were going to do should we win the election. So negotiations are going on in the transition period. Whether they will conclude by the end of this year as planned, I don't know. With regard to Michael Gove and the procurement scheme, I don't know exactly what the true facts of this were. One reads in the newspapers that it was due to the fact that we didn't receive the emails. That sounds extraordinary to me. So I don't know what went on. No doubt when the whole of this episode is analysed in minute detail with the benefit of hindsight, we will all find out. What I think is important now is that we all concentrate on doing our level best to make sure that the PPE testing kits, ventilators and so on get to the right place at the right time in the right numbers to make sure that we can get out of and minimise this whole episode as soon as possible.
Okay, we've got some nice short questions coming up, Sir Geoffrey. This is from Jane Knowles-Smith. When are the police actually going to take action against those who are flouting the stay inside request? Surely shopping 3 times a week is over the top for a household of 2. Obviously she's got an example there and perhaps doesn't want to reveal it, but you've talked to the police. Do you have an update on how they're approaching things in Gloucestershire?
Yes, I did have a conversation with Simon Elson just before this we went on air. One of their main preoccupations at the moment is trying to, with sensitivity, he emphasised that, making sure that people are observing social distancing, whether they are going shopping or whether they're out walking the dog or exercising or one of the permitted activities. I think people just need to be sensible and act with respect for the government rules, not only on their own behalf, but out of respect for other people who they might transmit the virus to.
Okay. Question from Richard Harrison. It's about teachers. What is the government strategy for protecting teachers putting themselves at risks in schools, looking after children of key workers? I'm assuming they don't have any PPE at the moment. Or are they entitled to PPE? I don't know what the situation is with teachers.
I don't know, but I'm sure the government rules would say that they, wherever possible, should practice social distancing to put them and themselves at least risk possible.
Okay, this is from Neo Winter. I don't really understand this question, but anyway, I'll read it out. An empty London Nightingale Hospital, ICUs underused, more empty ICU beds than last year and staff laid off or furloughed. What are we protecting it from? We gave enough capacity now, please explain.
Well, I think you're probably referring to the fact that we put a lot of resources into these Nightingale hospitals.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think the government would have been hugely criticised if, and it may well still happen, so we mustn't count chickens before they hatch, if the number of hospitalisation cases rise enormously and there aren't enough beds. We want to just make sure that we've got enough capacity to deal with that situation. So I think we must all hope that the Nightingale hospitals in London and Bristol and elsewhere never have to be used, because that means we're not getting to that threshold. But I think it was a wise precaution, even if the resources have been unnecessarily used.
Okay, getting some questions now to do with the grants. So we've moved on from earlier live streams where people are asking about how they apply for the grants. It's people waiting for these grants to be paid out. This is from Robert Sparks. We filled our grant form incorrectly on the 28th of March and we have not had our grant despite constant promises from CDC. Is there any help you can give to get these payments out to us, as we absolutely have nothing coming in? There are many, many businesses in Cirencester that have had no joy either. Before you answer that question, could I read out a similar question from Nigel Moor, Councillor Nigel Moor, who wanted this to be read out to you when we talked about the grant scheme. I have just been advised that although CDC claims to have processed 1,100 applications for this loan scheme, no firm appears yet to have received any money. In adjoining districts, the money is flowing. There are probably 3,000 firms eligible in the Cotswolds. So how many claims have yet to be processed? Please ask Geoffrey if he could look into this. I should say that the Barn Theatre, one of the businesses in the Barn Theatre, have literally just received their grants. So clearly some money is coming through, but clearly a lot of businesses are not getting their grants. Would you take that up with Joe Harris?
Not only would I take it up with Joe Harris, I already have, and I've already taken it up with Stroud District Council. Suffice it to say that I think although they've had the money from the government, they've had difficulty with the software from the government in their defence, both councils and other councils too. In terms of Cotswold, when I had the conference call this week, they informed me that they'd got about 500 active claims which had been completed correctly, that they were still in the business of processing. They've moved employees from other departments into that department to try and speed up the process. So I'm hopeful that the Barn Theatre are now an example of things that are beginning to move. But they told me, I think as of Wednesday when I had the call, that there were 500 active businesses and they have a total pot left of £10 million. So if you're entitled to the grant, I suggest you apply now with the correct details and in the hope that you will be processed within the next week or two.
Okay, conscious of the time, Sir Geoffrey.
And I should just say that in Cotswold's defence, I think other councils in Gloucestershire are struggling to get, with the volume of work, to get the grants out as well. So it isn't just Cotswold.
Like just two more questions very quickly, if I may. One is again from Neo Winter. What assurances do we have that sunset clauses within the Corona legislation will be adhered to? Past legislation now to enshrine this return of our rights, possibly a misnomer now given their loss. Do you know what he's referring to in
I do.
Sunset clauses?
When the government originally came up with their draft bill, they were proposing to put these quite draconian powers. We haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War, into the bill to last for 2 years. A campaign led by David Davis, which I supported, put enormous pressure on the government to say that they had to be renewed every 6 months. And I can assure you that after 6 months have elapsed, we will be pressing the government either to renew them if that's appropriate or to revoke them. And you will have to watch us. But I am absolutely conscious of what you say. They shouldn't be in place indefinitely.
Okay, the last question. This is from Councillor Rowley Hughes, who we both know very well. You make a very interesting point about mental health issues. When this pandemic actually comes to an end, will the government be prepared for the increase in mental health issues, which some people may already suffer with, as this is increasing every day, even before the lockdown? There's a very useful point there about the implications post the coronavirus. We may have conquered and killed the virus, but we're going to have a lot of other issues to deal with, particularly mental health issues.
Well, really, you do make an interesting point, and I have no doubt that once this virus is over, there will be an increase in mental health services. But even before the virus came along, we were moving in the right direction to give mental health parity of esteem with physical health, both in resources and in terms of will of the NHS to deal with it. So I have no doubt that once this whole thing is over, we will want to pay very close attention to those who need treatment for mental health services.
Okay, thank you, Sir Geoffrey. We have other questions that are coming in live stream, and they will all be written down, and we'll pick them up next week. This is an evolving process, as we've discussed earlier. What we're trying to do is to reflect the views of people. So if someone thinks we're talking too much or there are not enough questions and the balance is wrong, we're always prepared, I think, to change the format. But what we're trying to do is to introduce a bit of variety into these sessions, because there are a lot of questions, and if it's your question you want it answered, I fully accept that. As I said at the beginning, there are two short videos giving a quick report on Cotswold situation in Cotswolds North and Cotswolds South, which, if we close this session, and thank you and the Barn Theatre for your time and their time, and they're then going to switch to the two videos, because I know you've got a conference call with the other MPs, which you have every Friday night.
It's not just with the other MPs, it's really important. It's with all the heads of the health service, the county council, to see what all the frontline services are doing in Gloucestershire. So this is a very, very important conference call. May I just say in closing, my staff are absolutely inundated at the moment. So whilst we're pleased to hear from people who've got problems, if we take a little bit of time to respond to you, please be a bit patient. There are some people who are getting grumpy that we're not giving them a response immediately. That is because they have a huge workload. We all have a huge workload on our hands, but we're all doing our best.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Geoffrey, and I wish everybody a very, very good weekend. And stay safe, protect the NHS, and hopefully we'll come through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, very much. And thank you, everybody at the Barn.
Welcome to Richard Morgan, who is a Cotswold District Councillor representing Grumbalds Ash with Avening, based near Tetbury. And Richard is also the leader of the Conservative group on Cotswold District Council. What we're introducing today is a new feature called Cotswold South, and we've got another one called Cotswold North, and it's an opportunity for elected representatives in the south and the north of the district to give us an update on what's happening in their particular town. And for those of you that don't know, Tetbury, which is where Richard is based, is the second largest settlement in the Cotswolds after Cirencester. So we're about to enter the 5th week of the lockdown. And so I'd kind of like to get a feeling initially from you, Richard, as to how you think Tetbury and the surrounding villages are coping, just in general, with the last 4 weeks. Have you got some overall thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I mean, listen, it's a difficult situation. I'm not saying the overwhelming feedback I've got is that people in Tetbury and the surrounding villages are embracing the situation. They're trying to make the best of it. They're doing the best they can. There's been an outpouring of fantastic community spirit, which has really been motivating and inspiring. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's this is obviously a very difficult situation, you know, particularly for people who are elderly and living on their own, and people working from home with young children, and so yeah, there's mixed feelings. But overall, I think the sense from the Tetbury and the surrounding villages is we understand the urgency, we understand the importance of what the government are asking us to do, and we're, you know, very supportive of it, and we're making the best of what is a very difficult and challenging situation.
Well, thanks for that, Richard. looking at the community sector, have you got any examples of how Tetbury and the villages have risen to the challenge? Thinking here of things like care homes, schools, sports clubs, because I know you're very active in the sports area because you run a football team, don't you, for youngsters in Tetbury. Have you got some examples that you could give our viewers?
Yeah, listen, I mean, the entire community's rallied round. It's been a fantastic initiative. There's numerous examples. I'll just pick out a few, but I'm going to leave loads more out. But I mean, things like Cllr Spa, which is a big spa hotel we've got on probably about 4 miles outside of Tetbury. Richard Davis and his team, they've been fantastic. They've been cooking 500 meals and giving them out free to vulnerable residents in the area. We've got a really active Facebook group. One of our local residents, Sarah Carney, has set up Tetbury COVID-19 Mutual Aid on Facebook. And this is a brilliant system where you just go to Facebook and Sarah will pair you with a volunteer. So if you do need help, you go on and you get paired with a volunteer. There's so many examples of that. You know, the villages are playing, they're engaging with their local communities and, you know, organising like games of bingo where they go and pick up the bingo cards from the local phone box and things like that. So the community spirit down here is absolutely fabulous. We've got a lot more, you know, we're in a very fortunate position, and long may this continue, that we've got a lot more volunteers in our community groups than actually people that need help at the moment. So yeah, we're as I say, we're making the best of a very bad situation. But the one good thing that really has come out of this, and it is very humbling, is just how much the community have got involved and have been active and are supporting each other and helping each other.
That's brilliant. Could we turn to the business community? Because I know that Tetbury relies very heavily on tourism, as do many of the key settlements in the Cotswolds. And how do you think the business community is responding? Have you got any examples of good examples of where things are working well and where there are issues? It'd be great to get your take on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, to address the positives, I mean, the local business community have rallied round. I mean, I can give you numerous examples of this, but things like the Royal Oak in Laterton and the Cat and Custard Pot in Shipton Moyne. They're both supporting their local villages by now running basically food orders from there. So, for example, the Royal Oak in Laterton, you can go on their website, order food, and it will go and pick it up from the pub on the Friday. So there's loads of examples. I've got to say also thank you to the Church Street grocer in Tetbury, who it's a fantastic initiative what he's doing anyway, because it's quite a green shop. That's where you can go and buy your loose contents, so things like rice and pasta. You can go and buy it loose, and so he's working hard on the environmental purposes. But the good thing about him is he's absolutely whatever has been short in the supermarkets, that grocer seems to have been able to source it. So when toilet rolls were shortage, he had loads. I know
on my way, I'm coming
flowers
down,
are shortage.
I'm coming down.
Yeah, I seriously, the guy is an absolute superstar, and I dock my cap to him. You know, businesses like that, it's very humbling to see. I think, you know, our largest shops like the Co-op and the Tesco have adapted very quickly. You know, the Tesco's adopted a one-way system. There's screening to protect the staff who work there. So yeah, in terms of the business community, they, you know, those that can have adapted really, really well, and we're really grateful for that, and we're trying to support them as best as we can. However, I just can't not mention the pain that some businesses are going through at the moment. It's absolutely considerable. We're really hurting down here. We've got, as I say, we're very dependent upon the leisure sector. We have a very buoyant and vibrant wedding industry. So we've got places like Tithe Barn, Chavenage House, Kingscote Barn, the Manchester Centre, Alpen Manor, Hare and Hounds. All of these unique businesses basically fill our towns most Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays for weddings. And that's obviously that part of the industry has completely shut down, and that's got knock-on effects for you know, our local caterers, our local photographers, and the people who support those businesses. We've also got a lot of hotels who are, obviously had to shut their doors, and a lot of the pubs have had to shut their doors. So this is painful. And I'd say there's also, it may surprise you to know, but we've got some really quirky and fantastic and unique businesses down here as well. You know, things like making diesel pumps, which have been exported around the world. there's some really good businesses down in Tetbury and the surrounding areas, and obviously there's genuine concern. There's genuine concern from the business owners. Not so much of the short term. I think the support that the government has put in place in the short term is enough to get us through. But obviously there's long-term concern about when the lockdown is lifted, how quickly will we get back to normal? So yeah, there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of really good local businesses which have adapted and are providing really fabulous services to help us through this period. But for every one of those, yeah, it'd be amiss for me to mention that there's also some serious worries and concerns out there.
Okay, thanks. One last question I was going to ask you. Given that we're here with our MP and it's a live stream for viewers to watch this, and we're very grateful as ever to the Barn Theatre, have you got anything you'd like to say to the MP? Give him a message, take back to central government, because he's using these sessions to get feedback, and you're in a very prominent position in the community. Is there a message you want to give to our MP?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say a couple of things on that. The first thing I'd say is I'd like to personally thank him. He's been very involved in the Conservative group, and I know he's meeting with Cotswold District Council on a weekly basis. So he's very engaged and helping us locally with our issues. So I'd say thank him on my behalf for that. But I'd say that the two key messages coming out of Tetbury is we are overwhelmingly supportive of the government's position at the moment, but the two key things is we're really keen and enthusiastic for the NHS workers and the care home workers to get the protective equipment that they need, and we're clapping as enthusiastically as anyone else on the Thursday. I know Sir Geoffrey is working extremely hard. I know the government is working extremely hard to put that PPE in place, and we've had a number of large deliveries come into Gloucestershire in the last few days, actually. So I know the work's being done behind the scenes on that, but again, I just want to I'd urge that message that we're very keen for our fantastic health workers to get the protective equipment that they need. And the second thing as well is as I alluded to in my last question, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses, and even the larger-sized businesses around here, they're desperately worried. So I know the government has put in a number of initiatives and are putting pressure on banks to make financing and funding available. So again, I just would really just emphasise that message that I know the government's working hard on it, but please take the message back from the south of the Cotswolds that just keep that pressure on and do everything you can to get our businesses the support that they need.
Okay, that's great, Richard. I'd just like to end by saying thank you for your time and for what you're doing for the community and everybody in the community. And to say I gathered from talking to Sir Geoffrey that you're happy to do a regular slot for Cotswold South, whether you do it or some of your colleagues. But we're looking forward to catching up with you on a weekly basis until we get through this. So thank you for everything you're doing. Glad the office is looking tidier. It looks great from here. Have a great weekend, and we'll speak to you next week. Many thanks.
And you.
Cheers.
Thanks again. Take care.
Bye. I'd like to welcome Nigel Moor, Councillor Nigel Moor of Gloucestershire County Council, who is the portfolio holder for the environment and planning, and in particular the areas that he's very involved in at the moment as a result of the coronavirus are waste and community activities. So welcome, Nigel. You're going to give us a report on Cotswold North, and delighted that you're going to not only give us a quick report today, but you're happy to continue to give it on a weekly basis. So how do you feel that Moreton and the surrounding villages are coping with the coronavirus in general at the moment?
I think they're coping very well, David. I've got a lot of villages and towns in my division. Moreton and Stow are two of the major towns. And certainly the contact I've had with the parish clerks, they've all responded to this emergency by first of all, locating those vulnerable people in their communities and then ensuring that their needs are met. I mean, I live in Blockley and there's a strong community spirit here, and the village shop has done a fantastic job in ensuring that a wide range of foodstuffs are available. And I know this is also the case in Moreton. But if I may, I'd like just to touch on what I'm doing at the county in terms of my portfolio. From a public health perspective, it's critical that we in the districts maintain the curbside general waste and food waste collections. And the three operators across the county, Ubico, Amy and Biffa, have done a fantastic job in maintaining those curbside collections. And we as a county assist them by ensuring that the transfer stations, the biodigesters, and of course the energy from waste at Javelin Park, and they are all operating as smoothly as possible.
That's great to hear, Nigel. Have you got any other examples of how the community is tackling the virus? I know you're very involved in the care home side of things as well.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
Yes, what we're doing at the moment, through particularly in Stowe and Moorton, where there are a large number of care homes, I've asked the clerks in each case to try and find out from those homes if they have problems in obtaining PPE, and let us know, because GCC can help those care homes to get that PPE. We had a large quantity of PPE delivered to us earlier in the week.
That's really good to hear. And do you have I know you don't actually, you no longer have a business. You're concentrating all your time being a county councillor. I know it's a full-time job, but do you have a take on what's happening within the business community in Moorton and Stowe? Have you got any anecdotal thoughts on how the business community is reacting?
Well, I think there were some delays, I think, in getting money to the smaller businesses, but I think that's now been sorted as far as CDC are concerned. So I think hopefully the money is going to those businesses, because that's the crucial thing at the moment, is to ensure their cash flow. And as someone who had a business, and I remember the 1990 recession, and that's the thing that keeps you awake at night when you've got a small business, is your cash flow, because cash is king, as I've always learnt. Cash is king, turnover is vanity.
That's absolutely right. And as you know, we're here with our MP in these live stream sessions every week. Have you got a message you'd like to give to him that he can take back to government about how the North Cotswolds is reacting? Do you have a
Well, I think it's the same message from probably most communities, which is for government to really ensure that the money does flow to the self-employed, and also small businesses can get the loans from the banks that they need. We've got to just ensure that they've got this cash over the next few weeks.
That's really good to hear. And can I thank you for taking the trouble to come on today and give us your views, and also to thank you for being willing to do it on a weekly basis. And lastly, to thank you for what you personally are doing in the community, because I know you're extremely active. I know we look forward to Zooming as opposed to Skyping next week. So can I wish you a very good weekend, and thanks a lot, Nigel. Okay?
Well, thank you to all of the crew at the barn. They're doing a superb job. Thanks, David.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
In March 2018, we opened our doors to the public with a vision not just to create challenging professional theatre, but to use this as a platform to inspire and bring communities together. Theatre and culture build identity. With theatre and culture in our local life, the community landscape is more vibrant. Local life is enriched. We believe that the benefits of theatre should be available for everyone. Our Theatre for All programme has removed financial barriers, giving disadvantaged people access to the theatre free of charge.
So we were told that we'd come here and have the Christmas meal and then go and watch A Christmas Carol.
Our aim is to make live professional theatre available to everyone and use that experience for positive change. Theatre can be transformational in young lives. Our academy is now in its 4th year, and we continue to build on our vision of bringing the best performing arts tuition to the heart of the Cotswolds. We work hard to make our academy as inclusive and as accessible as possible. Discounts apply for parents with more than one child. Our bursaries help support talented children from less affluent backgrounds. The Academy creates a fun and challenging environment where children can build friendships and develop key skills, not just for theatre, but for life. We are also able to provide real opportunities for students who wish to pursue careers in the arts.
My name is Harry Apps. I am currently playing Marius in Les Miserables in the West End.
Barn outreach and learning programs engage with thousands of people. Our free workshops support the drama curriculum in local schools. Singing and musical theatre workshops in community groups and care homes have helped address issues of isolation. Our Song for Cirencester project in aid of mental health charities brought our community together in an unprecedented way. We've collaborated with many charities in the region, including the Cllr project, to support individuals dealing with the barriers to finding work.
Since working at UN, my life's changed. It's given me some purpose, given me an interest, some confidence I was lacking prior to all this.
The Barn Theatre played a pivotal role in the town's 2018 World War I centenary celebrations. Who could forget our record-breaking Human Poppy? Our live streaming work on the annual Advent Festival helped thousands engage and take part in Cirencester's Christmas festivities. In these times of uncertainty, we strive to keep the community together. The theatre may be temporarily closed, but our commitment to you goes on. Even now, our amazing costume department are helping the NHS by making scrubs for frontline workers. We've used our technology to build a free live streaming service that provides much needed community news and entertainment for all the family, broadcasting every day to keep us all connected. We are not just a theatre. We are the Barn.